6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
How's it going, everybody? Trying to fix my friggin' camera, and of course, one of the first things that happens. Dang thing. Looks like it's off center, but whatever. We're here, we're live. Hope you don't mind if it's off center. Whatever. How's everybody doing? How's it going? Glad you're here. Glad to be here. Yes, I have braids. I guess it's been a while since I've done that, huh? Especially two. Normally I just do one. It kind of like emphasizes the two different colors though, so I like it. And yes, there's still green in there. Not that it's always gonna have that in there. You're lucky I've kept it this long. It's been like, what, a year and a half since I've like changed the color up. Normally I go about 6 months. So one of these days I'll just show all of you my different colors of hair that I've had. But yeah. I went Pippi Longstocking. No, I'm not going to be that girly. Are you kidding me? I only do that for like special occasions if I'm fully dressing up. Like in character. So like sports and stuff. But my actual team is not quite playing yet. So maybe next time around. We'll see. Hope everybody's doing well and excited for the final part, episode, chapter thing of this book. Because I'm super excited for it, so we can talk about it next week and never talk about it again. I'm still having fun reading it to y'all, but lordy. Let's say hello to chat though. Hello, the goddess. Definitely scary stuff. And then we do have a new person in chat, and I'm just trying to figure out which troll changed their account. And I feel like it's probably Mud Crab, because I could see him doing that and then going back to normal afterwards. But we have a celebrity in the house, Shirley Jackson, the author of this book that it is, as it is. Sick of you bigots hating on my beautiful book, especially this purple-haired girl who hates on the style of my chapters, and Eleanor. Eleanor is a wonderful character. Journeys end in lovers meeting. Everybody take a shot. Thank you, troll in the chat. I mean, Shirley Jackson. Well, speak of the devil, because I'm pretty sure it's you. Hi, Mud Crab. How's it going? Clinton, hi. How's it going? How are you? If you're still here. Oh, we'll be here, but still working, and then errands. Nice. Well, I hope you got through work quickly if you are done with it and just running errands. Be safe while doing that. Wouldn't that be nice, Mud Crab? Hey, Dom, what's up? You guys are funny. Kel, hello, my friend. How's it going? Mud Crab, don't get me started on either thing. Oh God, they got a new singer. They haven't been friggin' valid until since the early 2000s. I swear. Yeah, Blue Eyed Scorpio gave me a bit of the lowdown on how different it is. Like, and I feel like it's an interesting take for what they did with it. I plan on watching the show probably this weekend if I have time, or throughout next week. Hopefully it's not that long. I haven't even looked. I get weird about shows, and like when I want to watch things, like I have to be in a specific mood for a specific type of show, and I like watching all different kinds of shows. So yeah. And yes, the braids, the goddess. Hey, your average patriot nerd. What you hauling today? How are you hauling today? And welcome. Thanks for being here. Stop it. Green is my favorite color. It's still gal. It's always going to be green-haired anti-liberal because it is my favorite color. When I first started doing this, like when I changed my name from like, I think it was like Tiff G or Tiffany G or something like that. I thought long and hard because I had colored hair at the time. I had red, white, and blue hair actually. And I decided to change my name like in the chats and everything to something that would kind of like, I was tired of the blue-haired liberal like shtick thing, stigma that always surrounded like neon bright colored hair. So I decided I was gonna change my name so we can kind of take the, I don't even want to say punk because I've never been like punk or anything. I just like coloring my freaking hair. So I just like making it a bit more normal. Like we are sane. There are people out there with crazy colored hair that are sane. We might be a little bit more rare than the psychotic blue-haired land whales, especially now, but still. I wanted to take it back. So that is why I chose my favorite color in the name, because like neon colored hair anti-liberal doesn't really work, or like neon haired, I guess. But then there's not even a good acronym with that. Not that I was going for an acronym. That just happened with That's Talking. and a couple people in chat, I think, before that. But anyway, that's why it's green-haired anti-liberal. And I've said this before, like when I first started in the realm of like Bet's Talkin' and Dermy's channel and stuff like that. So you can still call me Gal because it's always going to be green-haired anti-liberal. Just saying. I just wanted to change my hair up for fall, but I decided to keep the green in there. It's just hard to see on camera. I do have good taste in football teams, except I do follow Carr because fuck McDaniels for ruining everything. Hello, how's it going? Xeron the gamer. Forgive my mispronunciation if I did, either at the first or second attempt. Welcome. I'm glad to see you here. I don't know if you've read this before or if you've caught up and watched, like, what do people call it? The VOD? Is that like video on demand? I don't know what VOD means, but I see it sometimes. The replay is normally what I say. Ball. What is that going to be from? You were not known as one of the Blue Beatles. Halo submarine reference. I don't like the Beatles, so there's that. Patriotic neon girl. Like green-haired anti-liberal gets the point across very well. I mean, it could have been blue-haired, but that's my second favorite color, and it was just too close to just blue-haired liberals. So yeah, it's not baseball because what is tonight? The start of the football season. I'm in theme. You only watch sports that are scripted. Half the time, that's pretty much all of them nowadays, isn't it? Cool. I was right. I can be smart sometimes. VOD, video on demand. Yes, I did hear about Concord. I found it quite hilarious. I was never going to play the game. Shooters aren't really my game anyway. I will play them because I do have Halo, but I'm not any good at it. I am an RPG player. But yes, I did, and I had a very good laugh. It was out, what, 2 weeks? 2 freaking weeks. It's hilarious to me. Like, what were you thinking? This is why you go where the money is. Don't cater to these crazy people online who do not care about your game and will not give you money for it. It's crazy. I do feel like things are somewhat changing in the nerd realm, and not even just the nerd realm, just so like, I don't want to say real world things. So like Harley Davidson, what was it? Tractor Supply, Coors and Miller, I think. They've all kind of stepped down on those things. They haven't fully gotten rid of them. So don't let people tell you that things are completely changing with all of these companies. And hell, they're probably just going to change the name, but we got rid of our DEI companies. But yeah, like Kirsha, she does her breakdowns of everything. I haven't watched. I have it in my watch later, but she was talking about DEI and how like it's dying, but it's really just kind of just being changed. So I don't know. I have to figure out, maybe it's possible, and I might try and start streaming games. I'm still so new to all this stuff, but I want to do that stuff. So I'm more of a JRPG person where I play things like Suikoden 1 and 2. Those are like 2 of my favorite games all time. Legend of Dragoon, super old school 90s gamer. That be me. But I do see things, what's it called? Star Ocean, I think. Biggles played it one time. I'm gonna have somebody show me how to do all that type of stuff, and I'll figure it out and see what I can do. Ooh, I did start playing, what is it? Final Fantasy VI. That was recommended to me. I played 7, 8, 9, and 10. of those. But my brother played Xenogears. I never got into it because I got stuck in one spot. Or was that Xenosaga? It doesn't matter. Semantics at that point. Yeah. So I have all these little ideas in my head. I'll figure it out at some point. But I don't want to say I don't want to say no to Mass Effect because I do feel like I could probably do that. Ah, you don't like turn-based. Okay. Noted. See, and that's why I like them. Because they obviously the graphics and the art of it are very similar to anime. Sorry. Did not refill my water. I need to go get my tea. But that's I like turn-based style. That's what I grew up on. I can understand some people not liking that as their thing though. But I love the story of it. And I really like to grind and level up all the time as well, especially isekais. I'm not really into isekai as much, but I'm not opposed to them if they're good. I only recently, I don't know if Kel, if you know Magitech Mags, once I started, I reached out to her and I was just like, hey, I started playing this new game, or a new to me game. And I finally understand your name on here now. I thought you'd find it kind of funny. Speaking of Toriyama's last project, Dragon Ball is releasing in October. See, my issue with Dragon Ball is, for me, it ended in after Cell was defeated. I don't care about Boo, and Saiyaman can just be gone. And everything thereafter just doesn't exist to me. But I did love Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball was okay. I've heard about the Portal games, but I have not played them. Okay, I didn't get very far in it, but I'm assuming you're talking about Final Fantasy VI. But anyway, should probably get to it. Anybody have a recap for me? Because I kind of like what happens with these books is it just disappears from my brain sometimes because I think they're so ridiculous. With this book, not these books. And I hate that like there's such a big situation that takes place and just ends abruptly. And the very next chapter is just nothing else. Drives me a little crazy. Oh, yeah, Mrs. Montague came. Ugh. God, she's so annoying. She's worse than Eleanor, and that's saying a lot. I know you guys know that. So Theodora, main key points. Theodora and Eleanor go off on their own at night because they're dumb, and they leave the house and go for a little walk because they were fighting over dumb stuff. Because Eleanor was hanging out with Luke and had a conversation that was really ridiculous, where she considers him to be vain, and she proceeds to think, well, why doesn't he want to know about me? He's so vain. And I was just like, well, you just really, he's vain. And the first thought you have afterwards is, why isn't he wanting to know more about me? Screw off. Selfish little girl. Yeah. And so Theodora and her kind of like fight over it. But Theodora isn't interested. It's stupid. So they go on their little walk and they get scared. And we don't know what happened. So Theodora saw something different than Eleanor saw. but we don't know what it was. And then Mrs. Montague comes, and she's kind of that crazy paranormal type that we probably all have a sister who like reads tarot cards or plays with Ouija boards and things like that. And so she wants to commune with the ghosts and stuff. And she seemingly did with what is called a planchette, or just not a planchette, just planchette. I don't really know. But it's like a Ouija board, but it's slightly different. And she apparently did talk to a ghosty ghoulie, because it did mention kind of towards the end Eleanor's name, well, her nickname, Nell, unless Dr. Montague gave his wife information beforehand, and this is all just them screwing with her head for whatever reason. I don't know. That was a thought that I had. But they all think that that's nonsense. She's insufferable, by the way. She's just obnoxious to Dr. Montague, and he kind of just takes it. But with a woman like that, if you've already married her, you might as well just be like, okay, hon, sure, yeah, you go do that. Please stop talking to me. Go into the other room, because that's how I would feel. Like, let me do my stuff that I care about, because your voice is grating on every nerve. So she's really annoying. She talks to the ghost, whatever. They station her in the nursery room, which is probably the most haunted of the house, they feel like, because that's where she wanted to be, because blah, 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 blah. It's the most talky paranormal stuff. I really, really dislike this, if you cannot tell. So yeah, that's that. And then Eleanor wants peace and a quiet spot to lie and think, blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah. Mrs. Montague came with some professor who, like, helps her out or whatever. So he's kind of like her knight in shining armor type of character. It's really weird. And he's almost as insufferable as she is. But they go to bed for the evening, except our quartet of OG characters do not actually go to sleep. They all just go to Dr. Montague's room, or was it Luke's room? I can't remember, either one. Waiting for something to happen, because they felt like it had been a while since something happened with the house, and there was kind of like an air to something about to happen within the house. And it does. And it's the knocking down the hall thing. And yeah, freaks everybody out. I don't quite remember everything. Oh yeah, like the room starts like falling far away or something, and Eleanor ends up by herself, type of stuff. Come closer now, keep warm. And then they came, suddenly quiet in the secret, creeping silence. But basically, like, if you remember towards the beginning, like, it was the ghost or whatever, the house, poltergeist, whatever, was knocking on all of the doors, and then it gets to their door and it pounds more and more. And, like, the guys go to keep the door from being knocked off its hinges. And I think at one point it just stops all of a sudden. It knows we're here. So it becomes really cold. Blah, blah, blah. The furniture starts swaying. Noise in the hall became a lot louder. And then there's like a bunch of shaking, like the house starts shaking and it feels like the house is about to fall down. Yeah, it's just this whole paranormal thing supposedly that happened. And it was actually interesting. And it's unclear like if it's actually happening or not, but it just seemed like everybody was getting further and further away from Eleanor. Let's see. Eleanor could hear and see him far away in the distant room where he and Theodora and the doctor still waited. But like right before that, Luke asks if the two of them are all right. Well, if Theo's all right, and she says she's hanging on, but I don't know about Nell. And Luke says, keep her warm. We haven't seen it all yet. But immediately after that, like Eleanor, it's like she's seeing them from a distance. So I don't know if she's having some sort of out of body experience, maybe. It's kind of what it seemed like. Because he did say keep her warm as if she was holding on to her. She could see them very small and see them tighten when the bed rocked. That's talking about the bedposts, I guess. Things like the wall leaned forward and the door turned sideways far away. So I feel like she's hallucinating things in a stressful situation. And then all of a sudden it's over. She did, she felt it was over for her. It's too much, she thought. I'll relinquish my possession of this self of mine, abdicate, give over willingly what I never wanted at all. Whatever it wants of me, it can have. So she kind of just gave up and she said, I'll come, aloud. And Theodora was leaning over her, so she kind of gets snapped out of it. And they say she's all right, I think. Eleanor sat up, shook her head, staring. Composed and quiet, the house lifted itself primly around her and nothing had been moved. So it's like she just hallucinated on the bed. And then she tried to ask questions, but they wouldn't tell her, saying another night. And both Arthur and Mrs. Montague didn't notice a thing happening, but the four of them did. Because they're sleeping like babies. And when Eleanor asked what happened, Theodora just says Hill House went dancing, taking us along on a mad midnight fling. At least I think it was dancing. It might have been turning somersaults. And then they basically say, let's go to bed, or not let's go to bed, let's go to breakfast. Because they've been up all night. And that was like where we left off. So of course we're not going to get any answers, and we're about to start part 8. It would seem. But that's your recap. Did I miss anything? And if Shirley Jackson comes back, we can berate her for her terrible choices, at least. Oh, you stop after the Frieza saga. I can understand that. I just love Teen Gohan. And Vegeta. I do not like Goku. And that's one of the main reasons why I don't really care for anything after that. After the Cell Saga. Mudcrab. Recap. Not enough characters die horribly. Eleanor is a delight compared to Mrs. Montague. Yep, it's very true. She really is. And that's saying a lot. I feel like he is. It seems like there might be something going on with Arthur and Mrs. Montague, but it doesn't seem like there's any love lost between the two of them. Not condoning it or anything, but we don't know what happened. Summary of every chapter in the story. That's you're correct, Mudcrab. Eleanor saying stuff like how hearing stuff what happens in my head or something she was saying. Yeah. I mean, if it is actually some sort of haunting, maybe they will, but I really don't know if they will. I'm not going to lie. I feel like it's a stupid psychological story. Yep, sleeping like babies in the nursery. Although I think Arthur's in another room, but I don't know. Okay, you do a better one. I'm waiting. Oh, sorry, is that insensitive? Should I go dig up your gravesite? Don't get lippy with me, lady. But thanks for being here, Mudcrab. DBZ should have ended with Cell or skipped Great. Yes, it should have. And didn't they? Did they decanonize Dragon Ball GT or no? I can't remember. I feel like I heard that they did, but I don't know how true that was. I could be totally wrong, though. All right. I'm gonna get this started here, but I do need to grab my tea. So I'll be right back. I absolutely am not jealous of Bulma. First of all, fictional characters, all of them, and I'm not a crazy person. For the most part. I am a woman, after all. You'll take the credit, huh? Okay. I presume for Shirley Jackson. Yes, it was lame as fuck. I didn't realize it was a different studio. I thought it was the same. I mean, there's a lot of dumb forms. I can't even keep track of them anymore. And I heard that Super did not even remotely fix anything or help much. It was, you know what I'm tired of? Goku saving everyone. Always. And it's not even any altruistic reasoning behind it. He just wants to fight the strongest fighter. That's constantly what it is. He is not a hero. He's just stupid and eats a lot and wants to fight. I dislike him so much. And the more and more they keep doing the same stuff with him, the more and more I dislike him. At least Vegeta and Piccolo and Gohan, they have actual stories. Android 18 has a better story than Goku. It's ridiculous. Yeah, no. I'm not. No. I don't avoid anything. I don't know what you're talking about. Ooh, you're not going to like my opinion on Bleach. I only care about the saving of Rukia, and everything thereafter doesn't exist to me. I can't stand it. I loved Bleach. I loved it. And then I tried to keep watching after Rukia, like that arc. I also hate Orihime. So, spoiler alert, I don't like them getting together in the end, which is what I heard. But I don't know if it's even over. So maybe they don't. But I just don't care enough to keep going. Yeah, the filler does make it horrible. Let's see. Super after episode 5 should have ended with Cell. Gohan on top. Well, that's the whole thing. Okay, Dragon Ball Z basically starts with Gohan being considered a general overall badass because of his power levels. So, like, being half human, half Saiyan, it was leading toward how much more powerful that combination is. Like from episode 1 of DBZ. Because Raditz reads his power level and is shocked and was expecting it not to be a child. Not like it. And then, cut to Saiyaman. And just letting like Goku get like does his whole I'm gonna sacrifice myself even though he didn't need to because he's stupid. And then he stays there instead of coming home and lets Chi-Chi raise Gohan, which means that no fighting allowed, you're just in the books. And then Gohan just becomes this stupid kid that falls in love and does this stupid character superhero arc that I despise. I can't. It irritates me so much. It just completely takes the wind out of the sails for me. God. I can't stand characters like Orihime. She's just this whiny character that supposedly eventually she gets more, I don't even want to say badass because I don't know for sure, but I don't like female characters that are just there to be damsels in distress and then they just randomly get powers, but they're still really quiet. And I'm not like, I don't know, like Sakura from, not Naruto, Michael, but thank you. Fate Stay Ultimate. I think it's Fate Stay. Fuck. Oh. It might just be Ultimate. I can't exactly remember, but it's those types of characters that I can't stand. I am more of a Rukia type of character personality. At least with Hinata in Naruto, she comes out of her shell and she's actually a badass and she has to come to her own with it. She works hard for it. Orihime does not. I don't like her. Her jiggle physics fine. Like if you want to like her for that, that's whatever. But yes, Sam, I'm a weeb. Shut the fuck up. Thanks for being here. But I don't want to completely take away from the book. I'm not here to talk weeb stuff. Maybe, you know what? Maybe I'll start a show for that, I guess. Just talk about my random feelings on weeb shit and video games. Goes on a rant and gets annoyed, puts her hands to her face and pauses. And then, I do what I do. I'm glad someone gets some sort of enjoyment out of it, I guess. Yes, I know we're getting away from it. But I'm back. We're getting back on track, I swear. Okay, that down and away we go. Part 8, Chapter 1. Did anyone tell them that Mrs. Dudley clears at 10? Theodora looked into the coffee pot speculatively. The doctor hesitated. I hate to wake them after such a night, but Mrs. Dudley clears at 10. They're coming, Eleanor said. I can hear them on the stairs. I can hear everything, all over the house. She wanted to tell them. Then, distantly, they could all hear Mrs. Montague's voice, raised in irritation, and Luke, realizing, said, "Oh, Lord, they can't find the dining room," and hurried out to open doors. Properly aired, Mrs. Montague's voice preceded her, and she swept into the dining room, tapped the doctor curtly on the shoulder by way of greeting, and seated herself with a general nod to the others. "I must say," she began at once, "that I think you might have called us for breakfast. I suppose everything is cold. Is the coffee bearable?" "Good morning," Arthur said sulkily, and sat down himself with an air of sullen ill temper. Theodora almost upset the coffee pot in her haste to set a cup of coffee before Mrs. Montague. "It seems hot enough," Mrs. Montague said. "I shall speak to your Mrs. Dudley this morning in any case. That room must be aired." And your night? The doctor asked timidly. Did you spend a profitable night? If by profitable you meant comfortable, John, I wish you would say so. No, in answer to your most civil inquiry, I did not spend a comfortable night. I did not sleep a wink. That room is unendurable. Noisy old house, isn't it? Arthur said. Branch kept tapping against my window all night. Nearly drove me crazy. Tapping and tapping. Even with the windows open, that room is stuffy. Mrs. Dudley's coffee is not as poor as her housekeeping. Another cup, if you please. I am astonished, John, that you put me in a room not properly aired. If there is to be any communication with those beyond, the air circulation, at least, ought to be adequate. I smelled dust all night. Can't understand you, Arthur said to the doctor, letting yourself get all nervy about this place. Sat here all night long with my revolver, and not a mouse stirred, except for that infernal Branch tapping on the window. Nearly drove me crazy, he confided to Theodora. We will not give up hope, of course. Mrs. Montague scowled at her husband. Perhaps tonight there may be some manifestations. And we are moving on. To Part 8, Chapter 2. Theo? Eleanor put down her notepad, and Theodora, scribbling busily, looked up with a frown. I've been thinking about something. I hate writing these notes. I feel like a damn fool trying to write this crazy stuff. I've been wondering. Well, Theodora smiled a little. You look serious, she said. Are you coming to some great decision? Yes, Eleanor said, deciding. About what I'm going to do afterwards, after we all leave Hill House. Well, I'm coming with you, Eleanor said. Coming where with me? Back with you, back home. And Eleanor smiled wryly. I'm going to follow you home. Theodora stared. Why? She asked blankly. I never had anyone to care about, Eleanor said, wondering where she had heard someone say something like this before. I want to be someplace where I belong. I am not in the habit of taking home stray cats, Theodora said lightly. Eleanor laughed too. I am kind of a stray cat, aren't I? Well, Theodora took up her pencil again. You have your own home, she said. You'll be glad enough to get back to it when the time comes, Nell, my Nellie. I suppose we'll all be glad to get back home. What are you saying about those noises last night? I can't describe them. I'll come, Eleanor said. I'll just come. Nellie, Theodora laughed again. Look, she said, this is just a summer, just a few weeks' visit to a lovely old summer resort in the country. You have your life back home. I have my life. When the summer is over, we go back. We'll write each other, of course, and maybe visit, but Hill House is not forever, I can get a job. I won't be in your way. I don't understand, Theodora threw down her pencil in exasperation. Do you always go where you're not wanted? Eleanor smiled placidly. I've never been wanted anywhere, she said. Okay, Eleanor is weird as shit. What the? Bipolar, crazy bitch. That's all I have to say. Yeah, that was chapter 1 and 2, everybody. Are you shocked that there's such short, inconsistent chapters? I wonder if Shirley Jackson will come into chat and have something to say about it. I never watched Sword Art Online. I did hear that it was garbage, though. So sure, I'll agree with that. Although I do know someone that unironically enjoys it. I will not out him, though. Jiggle physics stream. Maybe if I become a VTuber or something. There's not much jiggling going on for me. I know, at this rate, we'll finish next week. Shush you. Well, thanks for stopping into chat, Zyron, Suron, the gamer. Have a good night. Yoroichi, there we go, has better jiggle physics. And end of week talk. Yeah. Oh, hey, Selena. How are you, my dear? How's it going? Don't apologize, goofball. Yeah, I just started a little bit late. Sorry. Yeah, no, we don't. Sorry, Shirley. I can speak for chat on this. We did not care for that chapter. This is like, get a job doing what? Like, what does she do now? How does she pay for her house? Like, still living off of her inheritance, I guess, maybe from her mom, but it didn't seem like that was much. But the fact is, I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door. I don't know what that's from, your average patriot nerd. Hey, don't talk about my Eleanor that way, lady. I do what I want. It's my stream. They were barely called chapters. I'll call it a chapter because it's within a book, and there was a number above each of them. But they're not really, no. Don't mention better stories. Huh. Uh-oh, mud crab. I just made mad because... Oh, see, I recognized it, but there's a certain thing that you have to realize about me. My memory is shit. I recognized it. And right before it was put here by your average patriot nerd, I was going to say it sounds like something from Edgar Allan Poe. So I was getting there eventually. My bad. What's the one with the heartbeat? I really enjoy that one. See, I really enjoy it and I can't remember what it's called. So it's my memory, people. I love listening to music. I don't know the names of artists or the titles of songs, and I know most of the lyrics of them. Songs that I've loved for ages. I just suck when it comes to stuff like that. The mug that I have today is a Nerdrotic one. Yes. One of two, actually, because we got an extra one in the mail from Geek Grind. So we have three. One of them is my brother's, and then I have the other two. The Telltale Heart. Yes, that one. Thank you, boys. Thank you. I do know where I'm at, Gravy. I'm at home. I know I sound flighty. I swear I do have some sort of intelligence between the ears. Sometimes it's just harder to find. I know. I don't know why you're saying that. Or are you reminding me because you think I've forgotten that? What do you mean you meant famous song? Did I miss a comment? Oh, yeah. She didn't know the song for Biggie Smalls' most favorite song. Famous song. Gotcha. I'm telling you. A song will come on and I'll sing along to it and I'll love it. It'd be great. But I won't remember the title of the song or who sang it. It's not my fault. I blame my 20s. Oh, what'd you guys think of the chapters? Yeah, Eleanor drives me crazy. What the hell was this random? Oh, I'm gonna follow you home. We just met and we joked about being cousins, but we're not actually cousins. And now I'm just gonna follow you home, even though I've been wishing for your death earlier on in the book. But now I want to follow you home. Okay, serial killer. Like what? What is that? What is that? And then why is this chapter here? Chapter 1. Why was it there? To comment on how annoying Mrs. Montague is in the morning. In general, really, but for this chapter specifically, it tells us they forgot to like explain how to get to the dining room. So they couldn't find the dining room. And she likes the coffee and she wants to talk to Mrs. Dudley. and they didn't get any sleep. There was a tapping at the window. So neither of those two had any frame of reference regarding what happened compared to everyone else. She's leaning more and more toward like this being a psychological thriller, and I dislike that a lot. And then chapter 2. What was the point of that? To show that Eleanor is just random as hell and bipolar as shit, I guess. It's not called great storytelling, Shirley Jackson. Sit in the corner and hush. Think about what you've done. I'll find out. It's been 199 pages, woman. If you had a story to tell, it would have found its way somewhere in there. I feel like I'm talking to myself, by the way. Beyond the fact that I am talking to myself through the Matrix to y'all. But even more so because it's not actually Shirley Jackson. You know, I wonder if Shirley Jackson is actually Sam. But I feel like he wouldn't be able to juggle that as well. Okay. Now I'm believing more and more that it's Sam because he just communicated with her. Yeah, I know. I'm going to sort of explain this comic. Yeah. Playing into it. Yeah, you're taking credit, but that doesn't mean it's actually you. Who are y'all's guesses as to who Shirley Jackson actually is? In San Francisco. Yep. A better female author of similar era is Agatha Christie, in my opinion. I have not read her books, but she wrote Clue, right? Not making that out of whole cloth. Like she did the murder mystery stuff. Now I really think it's Sam. Really screwing with my head in theme of this book because it's going to be a psychological thriller and it's going to piss me off. Sam wants to relieve my anger. But anyway, let me see. Wonder how long chapter 3 is. Oh, it's an actual standard. Oh, no. Maybe it's not a standard. Yeah. It's a standard chapter for like a kid's book, I guess. You want to call it that. Yeah, murder mystery. Are you saying nope to Clue? She didn't write Clue. Who wrote Clue? What's the one, like the Murder on the Orient Express? Was that Agatha Christie? I swear that Clue and that were written by the same author. I feel like I'm crazy. Eleanor would actually be a very tragic, sympathetic character in a different story. She has had this massively oppressive childhood and has never been allowed to have her own friends. Yeah, that's true. Like it is somewhat of a tragic backstory if she was a likable character. Yes to Express, no to Clue. Are y'all fucking with me? I'm so confused. Hi, Blue-Eyed Scorpio. Stories and books is overrated anyways. Oh, yeah, you're totally right about that. That's not the main friggin' point of books at all. Maybe you're the alt account, Shirley Jackson. You're a troll, too. That was in 1934. I wonder if that's in public domain. Maybe I should read some of hers at some point. Ah! I messed things up. Click the wrong button. It was just a board game. I swear to God it was a book. Well, c'est la vie. Let's get to chapter 3. Oh, that rhymed. Oh. But it rhymed with French, so that's not the best choice in life, is it? Part 8, Chapter 3. It's all so motherly, Luke said. Everything so soft, everything so padded. Great embracing chairs and sofas, which turn out to be hard and unwelcome when you sit down and reject you at once. Theo, Eleanor said softly, and Theodora looked at her and shook her head in bewilderment. And hands everywhere, little soft glass hands, curving out to you, beckoning. Theo? Eleanor said. No, Theodora said. I won't have you, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. Perhaps, Luke said, watching them, the single most repulsive aspect is the emphasis upon the globe. I ask you to regard impartially the lampshade made of tiny pieces of broken glass glued together, or the great round balls of the lights upon the stairs, or the fluted iridescent candy jar at Theo's elbow. In the dining room, there is a bowl of particularly filthy yellow glass resting upon the cupped hands of a child, and an Easter egg of sugar with a vision of shepherds dancing inside. A bosomy lady supports the stair rail on her head, and under glass in the drawing room, Nellie, leave me alone. Let's walk down to the brook or something. A child's face done in cross-stitch. Nell, don't look so apprehensive. Theo has only suggested that you walk down to the brook. If you like, I will go along. Anything, Theodora said. To frighten away rabbits. If you like, I will carry a stick. If you like, I will not come at all. Theo has only to say the word. Theodora laughed. Perhaps Nell would rather stay here and write on walls. So unkind, Luke said. Callous of you, Theo. I want to hear more about the shepherds dancing in the Easter egg, Theodora said. A world contained in sugar. 6 very tiny shepherds dancing, and a shepherdess in pink and blue reclining upon a mossy bank enjoying them. There are flowers and trees and sheep, and an old goat herd playing pipes. I would like to have been a goat herd, I think. If you were not a bullfighter, Theodora said. If I were not a bullfighter. Nell's affairs are the talk of the cafes, you will recall. Han, Theodora said. You should live in a hollow tree, Luke. Nell, Luke said. You are not listening. I think you frighten her, Luke, because Hill House will be mine someday with its untold treasures and its cushions. I am not gentle with a house, Nell. I might take a fit of restlessness and smash the sugar Easter egg, or shatter the little child hands, or go stomping and shouting up and down the stairs, striking at glued glass lamps with a cane and slashing at the bosomy lady with the staircase on her head. I might. You see, you do frighten her. I believe I do, Luke said. Nell, I am only talking nonsense. I don't think he even owns a cane, Theodora said. As a matter of fact, I do. Nell, I am only talking nonsense. What is she thinking about, Theo? Theodora said carefully, she wants me to take her home with me after we leave Hill House, and I won't do it. Luke laughed. Poor silly Nell, he said. Journeys end in lovers' meeting. Let's go down to the brook. A mother house, Luke said, as they came down the steps from the veranda to the lawn. A house mother, a headmistress, a house mistress. I am sure I will be a very poor housemaster, like our Arthur, when Hill House belongs to me. I can't understand anyone wanting to own Hill House, Theodora said, and Luke turned and looked back with amusement at the house. You never know what you're going to want until you see it clearly, he said. If I never had a chance of owning it, I might feel very differently. What do people really want with each other? As Nell asked me once. What use are other people? It was my fault my mother died, Eleanor said. She knocked on the wall and called me, and I never woke up. I ought to have brought her the medicine. I always did before, but this time she called me and I never woke up. You should have forgotten all that by now, Theodora said. I've wondered ever since I did wake up. If I did wake up and hear her, and if I just went back to sleep. It would have been easy, and I've wondered about it. Turn here, Luke said, if we're going to the brook. You worry too much, Nell. You probably just like thinking it was your fault. It was going to happen sooner or later in any case, Eleanor said. But of course, no matter when it happened, it was going to be my fault. If it hadn't happened, you would never have come to Hill House. We go single file along here, Luke said. Nell, go first. Smiling, Eleanor went on ahead, kicking her feet comfortably along the path. Now I know where I'm going, she thought. I told her about my mother, so that's all right. I will find a little house or maybe an apartment like hers. I will see her every day, and we will go searching together for lovely things. Gold-trimmed dishes and a white cat and a sugar Easter egg and a cup of stars. I will not be frightened or alone anymore. I will call myself just Eleanor. Are you two talking about me? She asked over her shoulder. After a minute, Luke answered politely. A struggle between good and evil for the soul of Nell. I suppose I will have to be God, however. But of course she cannot trust either of us, Theodora said, amused. Not me, certainly, Luke said. Besides, Nell, Theodora said, we were not talking about you at all. As though I were the game's mistress, she said, half angry to Luke. I have waited such a long time, Eleanor was thinking. I have finally earned my happiness. She came, leading them to the top of the hill, and looked down to the slim line of trees they must pass through to get to the brook. They are lovely against the sky, she thought, so straight and free. Luke was wrong about the softness everywhere, because the trees are hard like wooden trees. They are still talking about me, talking about how I came to Hill House and found Theodora, and now I will not let her go. Behind her, she could hear the murmur of their voices, edged sometimes with malice, sometimes rising in mockery, sometimes touched with a laughter almost of kinship. And she walked on dreamily, hearing them come behind. She could tell when they entered the tall grass a minute after she did, because the grass moved hissingly beneath their feet, and a startled grasshopper leapt wildly away. I could help her in her shop, Eleanor thought. She loves beautiful things, and I would go with her to find them. We could go anywhere we please, to the edge of the world if we liked, and come back when we wanted to. He is telling her now what he knows about me, that I am not easily taken in, that I had an oleander wall around me, and she is laughing because I am not going to be lonely anymore. They are very much alike, and they are very kind. I would not really have expected as much from them as they are giving me. I was very right to come because journeys end in lovers' meeting. She came under the hard branches of the trees, and the shadows were pleasantly cool after the hot sun on the path. Now she had to walk more carefully because the path led downhill, and there were sometimes rocks and roots across her way. Behind her, their voices went on, quick and sharp, and then more slowly and laughing. I will not look back, she thought happily, because then they would know what I am thinking. We will talk about it together someday, Theo and I, when we have plenty of time. How strange I feel, she thought, coming out of the trees onto the last steep part of the path going down to the brook. I am caught in a kind of wonder. I am still with joy. I will not look around until I am next to the brook, where she almost fell the day we came. I will remind her about the golden fish in the brook and about our picnic. She sat down on the narrow green bank and put her chin on her knees. I will not forget this one moment in my life, she promised herself, listening to their voices and their footsteps coming slowly down the hill. Hurry up, she said, turning her head to look for Theodora. And was silent. There was no one on the hill. Nothing but the footsteps coming clearly along the path and the faint mocking laughter. Who? She whispered. Who? She could see the grass go down under the weight of the footsteps. She saw another grasshopper leap wildly away, and a pebble jar and roll. She heard clearly the brush of footsteps on the path, and then, standing back hard against the bank, heard the laughter very close. Eleanor, Eleanor, and she heard it inside and outside her head. This was a call she had been listening for all her life. The footsteps stopped, and she was caught in a movement of air so solid that she staggered and was held. Eleanor, Eleanor, she heard through the rushing of the air past her ears. Eleanor, Eleanor, and she was held tight and safe. It is not cold at all, she thought. It is not cold at all. She closed her eyes and leaned back against the bank and thought, don't let me go. And then, stay as the firmness which held her slipped away, leaving her and fading. Eleanor, Eleanor, she heard once more, and then she stood beside the brook, shivering as though the sun had gone. watching without surprise the vacant footsteps move across the water of the brook, sending small ripples going, and then over onto the grass on the other side, moving slowly and caressingly up and over the hill. "Come back," she almost said, standing shaking by the brook, and then she turned and ran madly up the hill, crying as she ran and calling, "Theo, Luke." She found them in the little group of trees, leaning against a tree trunk and laughing softly and laughing, and talking softly and laughing. When she ran to them, they turned, startled, and Theodora was almost angry. "What on earth do you want this time?" she said. "I waited for you by the brook. We decided to stay here where it was cool," Theodora said. "We thought you heard us calling you. Didn't we, Luke?" "Oh, yes," said Luke, embarrassed. "We were sure you heard us calling." "Anyway," Theodora said, "we were going to come along in a minute, weren't we, Luke?" "Yes," said Luke, grinning. "Oh, yes." Everybody enjoying the utter and complete nonsense? Holy crap, this book. You don't think any words are required in books? Yeah, I know what kind of books you're talking about. I would start with, "And then there were none, a standalone story not using her main detective characters." Is that the title of the book? And then there were none or were none? I presume you meant were none. Hercule Poirot is like Sherlock Holmes without the 7% solution and raging Thank you, Sam. Had a quick look. Don't think Christy is in public domain. Well, thank you for checking, Mudcrab. I appreciate that. Way to focus in on the details, Gravy. Well, the next genre is classic with Journey to the West. But after that, I'm probably going to do an actual horror. So I'm probably not going to do any polls for the next two books. Well, I know I'm not for the next book. Probably going to do Frankenstein after that. Yeah, take a shot. I bet you do love that quote there, Shirley. To be or not to be? Right, like, I don't know. Is any of this conversation in reality or in her head? The end of that last chapter, they seemed to be high school bullies. But previously in the chapter, like, she was slightly annoying Theodora, and Luke was trying to be the neutral party and keep everything calm, suggested taking a walk to go to the brook. And when they did that, Theo and Luke were perfectly normal. Eleanor was in her head a freaking again, making mountains out of molehills with their attitude, but then she gets down there, thinks that they're following, sees the footsteps, hears them on the hill behind her, waits for them, then they're not there. She's driving me crazy. Yes, and the Cup of Stars was brought up again. No, the Cup of Stars from, like, when she was driving to the house and there was a cafe that she stopped at for some food, and a family had a little girl there who didn't want her milk because it wasn't in her cup of stars, where when she drank from it, you could see the stars in the bottom of the cup. And then later on, there's reference to it again. But Eleanor is pretending like it was her cup from her childhood. So now I don't know if this freaking interaction in the cafe ever happened, or did it, and then Eleanor just thought that it was her memory, like just took it upon herself to think that it was her memory. I don't know. This woman is crazy, and it's a psychological thriller, and it's driving me crazy. Yeah, no idea what happened in that chapter. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, nonsense. Could you try at least read my words right? And no, because at least it makes it more interesting. I make facial expressions, tones of voice. I admit my bias, but I'm really appreciating the show adaptation because I'm understanding more references. He did really well making it a separate story. I appreciate you not saying spoilers. I'm probably going to watch it this weekend. So, and it is interesting the way that you described like the show. And I like how they would adapt a book like this to the screen that way. So let's see. I probably agree. It's okay. You could still listen while I read it if you want, if I decide to read that at some point. Yes, what is the phrase? Part of the drinking game. I mean, the book itself is making me want to just drink. So is that the game, ultimately? I don't know. That chapter was nonsense. And chapter 4 is going to bleed into chapter 5 because it's like a half a page. So oh, dang. There's a lot of chapters in this part. Huh. Interesting. I'm going to have some fun timestamps after this stream. Part 8, Chapter 4. Subterranean waters, the doctor said, waving his fork. Nonsense. Does Mrs. Dudley do all your cooking? The asparagus is more than passable. Arthur, let that young man help you to asparagus. My dear, the doctor looked fondly upon his wife. It has become our custom to rest for an hour or so after lunch. If you... Certainly not. I have far too much to do while I am here. I must speak to your cook. I must see that my room is aired. I must ready planchette for another session this evening. Arthur must clean his revolver. Mark of a fighting man, Arthur conceded. Firearms always in good order. I don't disagree with him there. You and these young people may rest, of course. Perhaps you do not feel the urgency which I do, the terrible compulsion to aid whatever poor souls wander restlessly here. Perhaps you find me foolish in my sympathy for them. Perhaps I am even ludicrous in your eyes because I can spare a tear for a lost, abandoned soul. Left without any helping hand. Pure love. Croquette, Luke asked hastily. Croquette, perhaps? He looked eagerly from one to another. Badminton, he suggested. Croquette? Subterranean waters, Theodora added helpfully. No fancy sauces for me, Arthur said firmly. Tell my fellows it's the mark of a cad. He looked thoughtfully at Luke. Mark of a cad. Fancy sauces, women waiting on you. My fellows wait on themselves. Mark of a man, he said to Theodora. And what else do you teach them? Theodora asked politely. Teach? You mean, do they learn anything, my fellows? You mean algebra, like? Latin? Certainly. Arthur sat back pleased. Leave all that kind of thing to the teachers, he explained. And how many fellows are there in your school? Theodora leaned forward, courteous, interested, making conversation with a guest, and Arthur basked. At the head of the table, Mrs. Montague frowned and tapped her fingers impatiently. How many? How many? Got a crack tennis team, you know. He beamed on Theodora. Crack. Absolutely top hole. Not counting milksops? Not counting, said Theodora. Milksops. Oh. Tennis, golf, baseball, track, cricket. He smiled slyly. Didn't guess we played cricket, did you? Then there's swimming and volleyball. Some fellows go out for everything, though, he told her anxiously. All around types, maybe 70 altogether. Arthur, Mrs. Montague said, could contain herself no longer. No shop talk now. You're on vacation, remember? Yes, silly of me. Arthur smiled fondly. Got to check the weapons, he explained. It's 2:00. Mrs. Dudley said in the doorway. I clear off at 2. And moving on. Part 8, Chapter 5. Theodora laughed, and Eleanor, hidden deep in the shadows behind the summer house, put her hands over her mouth to keep from speaking to let them know she was there. I've got to find out, she was thinking. I've got to find out. It's called the Grattan Murders, Luke was saying. Lovely thing. I can even sing it if you prefer. Mark of a cad, Theodora laughed again. Poor Luke. I would have said scoundrel. If you would rather be spending this brief hour with Arthur, of course I would rather be with Arthur. An educated man is always an enlivening companion. Cricket, Luke said. Never would have thought we played cricket, would you? Sing, sing, Theodora said, laughing. Luke sang in a nasal monotone, emphasizing each word distinctly. The first was young Miss Grattan. She tried not to let him in. He stabbed her with a corn knife. That's how his crimes begin. Yeah, I'm not singing this to you, by the way. The next was Grandma Grattan. She so old and tired and gray. She fit off her attacker until her strength give way. The next was Grandpa Grattan, a-settin' by the fire. He crept up close behind him and strangled him with a wire. The last was Baby Grattan, all in his trundle bed. He stove him in the short ribs until that child was dead, and split tobacco juice all on his golden head. That was morbid. When he finished, there was a moment's silence, and then Theodora said weakly, It's lovely, Luke. Perfectly beautiful. I will never hear it again without thinking of you. I plan to sing it to Arthur, Luke said. When are they going to talk about me? Eleanor wondered in the shadows. After a minute, Luke went on idly. I wonder what the doctor's book will be like when he writes it. Do you suppose he'll put us in? You will probably turn up as an earnest young psychic researcher, and I will be a lady of undeniable gifts, but dubious reputation. I wonder if Mrs. Montague will have a chapter to herself. And Arthur and Mrs. Dudley. I hope he doesn't reduce us all to figures on a graph. I wonder, said Luke. It's warm this afternoon, he said. What could we do that is cool? We could ask Mrs. Dudley to make lemonade. You know what I want to do, Luke said? I want to explore. Let's follow the brook up into the hills and see where it comes from. Maybe there's a pond somewhere and we can go swimming. Or a waterfall. It looks like a brook that runs naturally from a waterfall. Come on, then. Listening behind the summer house, Eleanor heard their laughter and the sound of their feet running down the path to the house. And una más. Part 8, Chapter 6. Here's an interesting thing here, Arthur's voice said in the manner of one endeavoring valiantly to entertain. Here in this book. Says how to make candles out of ordinary children's crayons. Interesting, the doctor sounded weary. If you'll excuse me, Arthur, I have all these notes to write up. Sure, doctor. All got our work to do. Not a sound. Eleanor, listening outside the parlor door, heard the small, irritating noises of Arthur settling down to be quiet. Not much to do around here, is there? Arthur said. How do you pass the time generally? Working, the doctor said shortly. You writing down what happens in the house? Yes. You got me in there? No. Seems like you ought to put in our notes from planchette. What are you writing now? Arthur, can you read or something? Sure. Never meant to make a nuisance of myself. Eleanor heard Arthur take up a book and put it down and light a cigarette and sigh and stir and finally say, Listen, isn't there anything to do around here? Where is everybody? The doctor spoke patiently but without interest. Theodora and Luke have gone to explore the brook, I think. And I suppose the others are around somewhere. As a matter of fact, I believe my wife was looking for Mrs. Dudley. Oh, Arthur sighed again. Well, might as well read, I guess. he said, and then after a minute, say, doctor, I don't like to bother you, but listen to what it says here in this book. That could have easily been just one chapter with time passage breaks in between rather than making them into 3 separate chapters. I can't believe that I just read 3 chapters in that sitting. I don't believe you, Shirley. I really, really don't. Okay, so I do have a bit of a theory. I don't want to say it just yet, but it has something to do with Eleanor and wanting them to talk about her and then them not saying a word about her, which would be better than a psychological thriller. I don't want to give the hint because that I feel would give it away, so I'm not going to. I was going to reference a movie, but I don't. It would definitely give it away. And I want to see if you guys think the same thing. Must clean the fathers. I don't know for I don't even know what a Peter. You know what? Don't care. The moment I said the first name, I realized. No, I'm not gonna sing. Not happening. I can sing just fine, but not when I'm like reading. It's my lack of inner monologue to be able to hear the tune that it might be set against. So I'm not gonna read. Sorry, not sorry. I don't want to just say it. Do you guys actually want me to say what my theory is? What the hell is self-trepanation? I'm not as well read on weird terminologies as you are, Sam. I think Eleanor might be dead. Happy now? And she doesn't realize it. Like, I think that she got into a car accident on the way to the house and she died, but she doesn't know it. And like, I feel like maybe she is the one that was writing the stuff. I don't know if they knew that she was there or not. At first, they didn't realize that she's a ghost, but now they do. I don't know. Yes. And that was the movie I was going to reference. And thank you, Sam, for the vocabulary lesson. Drilling a hole in one's head. Self-trepanation. I've literally never heard the term, but I don't know why I would have heard the term, honestly. Why do you know that term? What is wrong with you? Like, I feel like that just because like she was, which also don't get me started, how she thinks that Luke is so vain. And then she's spying on people to hear them talk about her or to see if they're talking about her, but then they don't talk about her. And I don't know. I'm probably going to be wrong because I want it to at least be some sort of haunting, even though it's not scary, rather than a stupid psychological horror. I feel like I have dust on the bottom of my hat. Because she's a flighty woman who doesn't pay attention to her surroundings. And like, even on the drive over, she would see something as a reference point to make a story out of in her past life or her future life. She could see herself doing these things and having this life. And she was doing some of that while she was driving. So she's a distracted driver, not just a woman driver, though it does put her at a disadvantage. Oh, that could be a fancy way of saying lobotomize, I guess. Drilling a hole in one's head. Interesting. But yeah, while I read the next 2 chapters, because they're both short as well, probably should have just read all of them, but figured I should at least discuss a little bit in between. You guys let me know if you think that that's a good theory or if you have a different theory. Even Blue-Eyed Scorpio can put his theory of how the book will go if he so feels and is still here listening. I'd be interested to see without him, or see him try not to spoil it, because he probably knows more or enough to be more accurate than the rest of us. Part 8, Chapter 7. No, Mrs. Montague said. I do not believe in throwing young people together promiscuously, Mrs. Dudley. If my husband had consulted me before arranging this fantastic house party. Well, now, it was Mrs. Dudley's voice, and Eleanor, pressed against the dining room door, stared and opened her mouth wide against the wooden panels of the door. I always say, Mrs. Montague, that you're only young once. Those young people are enjoying themselves, and it's only natural for the young. But living under one roof, it's not as though they weren't grown up enough to know right from wrong. That pretty Theodora lady is old enough to take care of herself, I'd think, no matter how gay Mr. Luke. I need a dry dish towel, Mrs. Dudley, for the silverware. It's a shame, I think, the way children grow up these days knowing everything. There should be more mysteries for them, more things that belong rightly to grown-ups, that they have to wait to find out. Then they find them out the hard way. Mrs. Dudley's voice was comfortable and easy. Dudley brought in these tomatoes from the garden this morning, she said. They did well this year. Shall I start on them? No. Oh, no. You sit down over there and rest. You've done enough. I'll put on the water and we'll have a nice cup of tea. Yep, that was Chapter 7, everybody. Part 8, Chapter 8. Journeys end in lovers' meeting, Luke said, and smiled across the room at Eleanor. Does that blue dress on Theo really belong to you? I've never seen it before. I am Eleanor, Theodora said wickedly, because I have a beard. You were wise to bring clothes for two, Luke told Eleanor. Theo would never have looked half so well in my old blazer. I am Eleanor, Theo said, because I am wearing blue. I love my love with an E because she is ethereal. Her name is Eleanor, and she lives in expectation. She is being spiteful, Eleanor thought remotely. From a great distance, it seemed. She could watch these people and listen to them. Now, she thought, Theo is being spiteful and Luke is trying to be nice. Luke is ashamed of himself for laughing at me, and he is ashamed of Theo for being spiteful. Luke, Theodora said with a half glance at Eleanor, come and sing to me again. Later, Luke said uncomfortably. The doctor has just set up the chessmen. He turned away in some haste. Theodora, peaked, leaned her head against the back of her chair and closed her eyes, clearly determined not to speak. Eleanor sat, looking down at her hands, and listened to the sounds of the house. Somewhere upstairs, a door swung quietly shut. A bird touched the tower briefly and flew off. In the kitchen, the stove was settling and cooling, with little soft creakings. Hey, Shirley, while I'm reading this, if next time around you could actually do proper punctuation so I can read it properly, that'd be great. An animal, a rabbit, moved through the bushes by the summer house. She could even hear, with her new awareness of the house, the dust drifting gently in the attics, the wood aging. Only the library was close to her. She could not hear the heavy breathing of Mrs. Montague and Arthur over their planchette, nor their little excited questions. She could not hear the books rotting or rust seeping into the circular iron stairway to the tower. In the little parlor, she could hear, without raising her eyes, Theodora's small, irritated tappings and the quiet sound of the chessmen being set down. She heard when the library door slammed open, and then the sharp, angry sound of footsteps coming to the little parlor, and then all of them turned as Mrs. Montague opened the door and marched in. I must say, said Mrs. Montague on a sharp, explosive breath. I really must say that this is the most infuriating. My dear, the doctor rose, but Mrs. Montague waved him aside angrily. If you had the decency, she said. Arthur, coming behind her sheepishly, moved past her and, almost slinking, settled in a chair by the fire. He shook his head wearily when Theodora turned to him. The common decency. After all, John, I did come all this way, and so did Arthur, just to help out, and I certainly must say that I never expected to meet with such cynicism and incredulity from you, of all people, and these, she gestured at Eleanor and Theodora and Luke, all I ask is some small minimum of trust, just a little bit of sympathy for all I am trying to do, and instead you disbelieve, you scoff, you mock and jeer. Breathing heavily, red-faced, she shook her finger at the doctor. Planchette, she said bitterly, will not speak to me tonight. Not one single word have I had from Planchette as a direct result of your sneering and your skepticism. Planchette may very possibly not speak to me for a matter of weeks. It has happened before, I can tell you. It has happened before when I subjected it to the taunts of unbelievers. I have known Planchette to be silent for weeks, and the very least I could have expected, coming here as I did with none but the finest motives, was a little respect. She shook her finger at the doctor, wordless for the moment. My dear, the doctor said, I am certain that none of us would knowingly have interfered. Mocking and jeering, were you not? Skeptical with Planchette's very words before your eyes. Those young people, pert and insolent. Mrs. Montague, really, said Luke, but Mrs. Montague brushed past him and sat herself down, her lips tight and her eyes blazing. The doctor sighed, started to speak, and then stopped. Turning away from his wife, he gestured Luke back to the chess table. Apprehensively, Luke followed, and Arthur, wriggling in his chair, said in a low voice to Theodora, Never seen her so upset, you know. Miserable experience, waiting for Planchette. So easily offended, of course, sensitive to atmosphere. Seeming to believe that he had satisfactorily explained the situation, he sat back and smiled timidly. Eleanor was hardly listening, wondering dimly at the movement in the room. Someone was walking around, she thought, without interest. Luke was walking back and forth in the room, talking softly to himself. Surely an odd way to play chess. Humming? Singing? Once or twice, she almost made out a broken word, and then Luke spoke quietly. He was at the chess table where he belonged, and Eleanor turned and looked at the empty center of the room, where someone was walking and singing softly. And then she heard it clearly. Go walking through the valley, go walking through the valley, go walking through the valley, as we have done before. Why, I know that, she thought, listening, smiling to the faint melody. We used to play that game. I remember that. It's simply that it's a most delicate and intricate piece of machinery, Mrs. Montague was saying to Theodora. She was still angry, but visibly softening under Theodora's sympathetic attention. The slightest air of disbelief offends it, naturally. How would you feel if people refused to believe in you? Go in and out the windows, go in and out the windows, go in and out the windows, as we have done before. The voice was light, perhaps only a child's voice, singing sweetly and thinly on the barest breath, and Eleanor smiled and remembered hearing the little song more clearly than Mrs. Montague's voice, continuing about Planchette. Go forth and face your lover, go forth and face your lover, go forth and face your lover, as we have done before. She heard the little melody fade and felt the slight movement of air as the footsteps came close to her, and something almost brushed her face. Perhaps there was a tiny sigh against her cheek, and she turned in surprise. Luke and the doctor bent over the chessboard. Arthur leaned confidingly close to Theodora, and Mrs. Montague talked. None of them heard it, she thought with joy. Nobody heard it but me. Yeah, I wasn't going to sing that either. Surely going to yell at me. I don't know why I took a drink when I read that. I don't understand what's going on with Mrs. Dudley, because the fact that she was talking to Mrs. Montague almost normal, like, it's very weird. Yeah, in the chapter. Everybody drank. Beginning of the chapter. I wear the leather corset at 12. What? Okay, that's in quotes. What the hell is that from? I don't know. I don't know. I'm really confused. Like, I don't hold too much to the belief that Eleanor's dead, but it's definitely a possibility, I guess. They all seem to be ignoring her at times, but not all the time. It's confusing. Or maybe she died at some point. So when she was talking to Mrs. Montague, they were talking about Theo and Luke and potentially Eleanor. But I think it was just Theo and Luke because those two had went off together somewhere. So Mrs. Montague was commenting on like the impropriety of their actions or whatever. That's what I got from that conversation. It was a very weird, ridiculous conversation because Mrs. Dudley doesn't talk to people beyond like her catchphrases. So I don't know what the hell's going on with that. And then, of course, Mrs. Montague and her planchette. Oh, she's mad. Go figure. Lenore's going a bit batty for sure. Yeah. Think what you want. Maybe the book's a product of its time. What made you decide to turn Mrs. Dudley into such a kinky gal? All right. I will be right back. I'm going to get more tea. All right. Sorry about that. Eleanor's baby doll from Sucker. This is real. I hate the end of that freaking movie. Yeah. So I love the film until the end. But I hate psychological thrillers for the most part. Like some of them can be good, but I'd rather have like horror or fantastical. Not, oh, we're going to subvert your expectations and, oh, what you thought was happening wasn't actually happening and like Secret Window. Thing with Sucker Punch is that Baby Doll isn't the main character. Rocket is. Everything is in Rocket's head. Wait, which one was Rocket? Is that the one that like she gets to, like, she helps sneak out. Is that Rocket? It's been a while since I've seen it. I don't exactly rewatch it all the time. That's how I gauge if I really like a film, is if the rewatchability of it. I don't believe your promise there, Shirley. None of this is making any sense. There's only like 18 pages left. I doubt it can get much better. You got the Tea of Spirits, Jen. Came out pretty good last week. Well, we are moving on to part 9 at least, so I can go back to the chapter 1s of the world. Now, this singing, is it just in her head? Like no one else can hear it. She's recognizing the tune. Is it just her singing? She definitely is crazy. I think it was 18 pages. Yeah. So let's get through and power through. I'm going to check and see how many chapters it equates to. Let's do it. Part 9, Chapter 1. Eleanor closed the bedroom door softly behind her, not wanting to awaken Theodora, although the noise of a door closing would hardly disturb anyone, she thought, who slept so soundly as Theodora. I learned to sleep very lightly, she told herself comfortingly, when I was listening for my mother. The hall was dim, lighted only by the small nightlight over the stairs, and all the doors were closed. Funny, Eleanor thought, going soundlessly in her bare feet along the hall carpet. It's the only house I ever knew where you don't have to worry about making noise at night, or at least about anyone knowing it's you. She had awakened with the thought of going down to the library, and her mind had supplied her with a reason. I cannot sleep, she explained to herself, and so I'm going downstairs to get a book. If anyone asks me where I am going, it is down to the library to get a book because I cannot sleep. It was warm, drowsily, luxuriously warm. She went barefoot and in silence down the great staircase and to the library door before she thought, but I can't go in there. I'm not allowed in there, and recoiled in the doorway before the odor of decay which nauseated her. Mother, she said aloud and stepped quickly back. Come along, a voice answered distinctly upstairs, and Eleanor turned, eager, and hurried to the staircase. Mother, she said softly, and then again, Mother. A little soft laugh floated down to her, and she ran, breathless, up the stairs and stopped at the top, looking to the right and left along the hallway at the closed doors. You're here somewhere, she said, and down the hall the little echo went, slipping in a whisper on the tiny currents of air. Somewhere, it said, somewhere. Laughing, Eleanor followed, running soundlessly down the hall to the nursery doorway. The cold spot was gone, and she laughed up at the two grinning faces looking down at her. Are you in here? She whispered outside the door. Are you in here? And knocked, pounding with her fists. Yes. It was Mrs. Montague inside, clearly just awakened. Yes. Come in, whatever you are. No, no, thought Eleanor, hugging herself and laughing silently. Not in there, not with Mrs. Montague, and slipped away down the hall, hearing Mrs. Montague behind her calling, I am your friend. I intend you no harm. Come in and tell me what is troubling you. She won't open her door, Eleanor thought wisely. She is not afraid, but she won't open her door, and knocked, pounding, against Arthur's door, and heard Arthur's awakening gasp. Sorry for the doorbell. That's food. Dancing, the carpet soft under her feet, she came to the door behind which Theodora slept. Faithless Theo, she thought. Cruel, laughing Theo. Wake up, wake up, wake up. And pounded and slapped the door, laughing, and shook the doorknob, and then ran swiftly down the hall to Luke's door and pounded. Wake up, she thought. Wake up and be faithless. None of them will open their doors, she thought. They will sit inside with the blankets pressed around them, shivering and wondering what is going to happen to them next. Wake up, she thought, pounding on the doctor's door. I dare you to open your door and come out to see me dancing in the hall of Hill House. Then Theodora startled her by calling out wildly, Nell? Nell? Doctor, Luke, Nell's not here. Poor house, Eleanor thought. I had forgotten Eleanor. Now they will have to open their doors, and she ran quickly down the stairs, hearing behind her the doctor's voice raised anxiously, and Theodora calling, Nell? Eleanor? What fools they are, she thought. Now I will have to go into the library. Mother, mother, she whispered, mother, and stopped at the library door, sick. Behind her, she could hear them talking upstairs in the hall. Funny, she thought. I can feel the whole house. And heard even Mrs. Montague protesting, and Arthur, and then the doctor clearly. We've got to look for her. Everyone please hurry. Well, I can hurry too, she thought, and ran down the corridor to the little parlor where the fire flickered briefly at her when she opened the door, and the chessmen sat where Luke and the doctor had left their game. The scarf Theodora had been wearing lay across the back of her chair. I can take care of that too, Eleanor thought, her maid's pathetic finery, and put one end of it between her teeth and pulled, tearing, and then dropped it down when she heard them behind her on the stairs. They were coming down all together, anxious, telling one another where to look first, now and then calling, Eleanor, Nell. Coming, coming, she heard far away, somewhere else in the house, and she heard the stairs shake under her feet and a cricket stir on the lawn. Daring, gay, she ran down the corridor again to the hall and peeked out at them from the doorway. They were moving purposefully all together, straining to stay near one another, and the doctor's flashlight swept the hall and stopped at the great front door, which was standing open wide. Then, in a rush, calling, Eleanor, Eleanor, they ran all together across the hall and out the front door, looking and calling, the flashlight moving busily. Eleanor clung to the door and laughed until tears came into her eyes. What fools they are, she thought. We trick them so easily. They are so slow and so deaf and so heavy. They trample over the house, poking and peering and rough. She ran across the hall and through the game room and into the dining room, and from there into the kitchen with its doors. It's good here, she thought. I can go in any direction when I hear them. When they came back into the front hall, blundering and calling her name, she darted quickly out onto the veranda into the cool night. She stood with her back against the door, the little mists of Hill House curling around her ankles, and looked up at the pressing, heavy hills. Gathered comfortably into the hills, she thought, protected and warm. Hill House is lucky. Eleanor? They were very close, and she ran along the veranda and darted into the drawing room. Hugh Crane, she said, will you come and dance with me? She curtsied to the huge leaning statue, and its eyes flickered and shone at her. Little reflected lights touching the figurines and the gilded chairs, and she danced gravely before Hugh Crane, who watched her, gleaming. Go in and out the windows, she sang, and felt her hands taken as she danced. Go in and out the windows. And she danced out onto the veranda and around the house. Going around and around and around the house, she thought, and none of them can see me. She touched a kitchen door as she passed, and 6 miles away Mrs. Dudley shuddered in her sleep. She came to the tower, held so tightly in the embrace of the house, in the straining grip of the house, and walked slowly past its gray stones, not allowed to touch even the outside. Then she turned and stood before the great doorway. The door was closed again, and she put out her hand and opened it effortlessly. Thus I enter a Hill House, she told herself, and stepped inside as though it were her own. Here I am, she said aloud. I've been all around the house, in and out the windows, and I danced. Eleanor? It was Luke's voice, and she thought, of all of them, I would least like to have Luke catch me. Don't let him see me, she thought beggingly, and turned and ran without stopping into the library. And here I am, she thought. Here I am inside. It was not cold at all, but deliciously, fondly warm. It was light enough for her to see the iron stairway curving around and around up to the tower, and the little door at the top. Under her feet, the stone floor moved caressingly, rubbing itself against the soles of her feet, and all around the soft air touched her, stirring her hair, drifting against her fingers, coming in a light breath across her mouth, and she danced in circles. No stone lions for me, she thought, no oleanders. I have broken the spell of Hill House and somehow come inside. I am home, she thought, and stopped in wonder at the thought. I am home. I am home, she thought. Now to climb. Climbing the narrow iron stairway was intoxicating, going higher and higher, around and around, looking down, clinging to the slim iron railing, looking far, far down onto the stone floor. Climbing, looking down, she thought of the soft green grass outside and the rolling hills and the rich trees. Looking up, she thought of the tower of Hill House rising triumphantly between the trees, tall over the road which wound through Hillsdale, and past a white house set in flowers, and past the magic oleanders, and past the stone lions, and on, far, far away, to a little lady who was going to pray for her. Time is ended now, she thought. All that is gone and left behind, and that poor little lady praying still for me. Eleanor! For a minute she could not remember who they were. Had they been guests of hers in the house of the stone lions? Dining at her long table in the candlelight? Had she met them at the inn over the tumbling stream? Had one of them come riding down a green hill, banners flying? Had one of them run inside her in the darkness? Had one of them run beside her in the darkness? And then she remembered, and they fell into place where they belonged, and she hesitated, clinging to the railing. They were so small, so ineffectual. They stood far below on the stone floor and pointed at her. They called to her, and their voices were urgent and far away. Luke, she said, remembering. They could hear her, because they were quiet when she spoke. Dr. Montague, she said. Mrs. Montague, Arthur. She could not remember the other, who stood silent and a little apart. Eleanor, Dr. Montague called, turn around very carefully and come slowly down the steps. Move very, very slowly, Eleanor. Hold on to the railing all the time. Now turn and come down. What on earth is the creature doing? Mrs. Montague demanded. Her hair was in curlers and her bathrobe had a dragon on the stomach. Make her come down so we can go back to bed. Arthur, make her come down at once. See here, Arthur began, and Luke moved to the foot of the stairway and started up. For God's sake, be careful, the doctor said as Luke moved steadily on. The thing is rotted away from the wall. It won't hold both of you, Mrs. Montague said positively. You'll have it down on your heads. Arthur, move over near here near the door. Eleanor, the doctor called, can you turn around and start down slowly? Above her was only the little trapdoor leading out onto the turret. She stood on the little narrow platform at the top and pressed against the trapdoor, but it would not move. Futilely, she hammered against it with her fists, thinking wildly, make it open, or they'll catch me. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw Luke climbing steadily around and around. Eleanor, he said, stand still, don't move. And he sounded frightened. I can't get away, she thought, and looked down. She saw one face clearly, and the name came into her mind. Theodora, she said. Nell, do as they tell you, please. Theodora? I can't get out. The door's been nailed shut. Damn right it's been nailed shut, Luke said, and lucky for you too, my girl. Climbing, coming very slowly, he had almost reached the narrow platform. Stay perfectly still, he said. Stay perfectly still, Eleanor, the doctor said. Nell, Theodora said, please do what they say. Why? Eleanor looked down and saw the dizzy fall of the tower below her, the iron stairway clinging to the tower walls, shaking and straining under Luke's feet, the cold stone floor, the distant, pale, staring faces. How can I get down? She asked helplessly. Doctor, how can I get down? Move very slowly, he said. Do what Luke tells you. Nell, Theodora said, don't be frightened. It will be all right, really. Of course it will be all right, Luke said grimly. Probably it will only be my neck that gets broken. Hold on, Nell. I'm coming onto the platform. I want to get past you so you can go down ahead of me. He seemed hardly out of breath in spite of climbing, but his hand trembled as he reached out to take hold of the railing, and his face was wet. Come on, he said sharply. Eleanor hung back. The last time you told me to go ahead, you never followed, she said. Perhaps I will just push you over the edge, Luke said. Let you smash down there on the floor. Now behave yourself and move slowly. Get past me and start down the stairs. And just hope, he added furiously, that I can resist the temptation to give you a shove. Meekly, she came along the platform and pressed herself against the hard stone wall while Luke moved cautiously past her. Start down, he said. I'll be right behind you. Precariously, the iron stairway shaking and groaning with every step, she felt her way. She looked at her hand on the railing, white because she was holding so tight, and at her bare feet going one at a time, step by step, moving with extreme care, but never looked down again to the stone floor. Go down very slowly, she told herself over and over, not thinking of more than the steps which seemed almost to bend and buckle beneath her feet. Go down very, very, very slowly. Steady, Luke said behind her. Take it easy now. Nothing to be afraid of. We're almost there. Involuntarily, below her, the doctor and Theodora held out their arms as though ready to catch her if she fell, and once when Eleanor stumbled and missed a step, the handrail wavering as she clung to it, Theodora gasped and ran to hold the end of the stairway. It's all right, my Nellie, she said over and over. It's all right. It's all right. Only a little farther, the doctor said. Creeping, Eleanor slid her feet down one step after another, and at last, almost before she could believe it, stepped off onto the stone floor. Behind her, the stairway rocked and clanged as Luke leapt down from the last few steps and walked steadily across the room to fall against a chair and stop, head down and trembling still. Eleanor turned and looked up at the infinitely high little spot where she had been standing, at the iron stairway, warped and crooked and swaying against the tower wall, and said in a small voice, I ran up all the way. Mrs. Montague moved purposefully forward from the doorway where she and Arthur had been sheltering against the probable collapse of the stairway. Does anybody agree with me, she asked with great delicacy, in thinking that this young woman has given us quite enough trouble tonight? I, for one, would like to go back to bed, and so would Arthur. Hill House, the doctor began, this childish nonsense has almost certainly destroyed any chance of manifestations tonight, I can tell you. I certainly do not look to see any of our friends from beyond after this ridiculous performance. So if you will all excuse me, and if you are sure that you are finished with your posturing and performing and waking up busy people, I will say good night. Arthur. Mrs. Montague swept out, dragon rampant, quivering with indignation. Luke was scared, Eleanor said, looking at the doctor and at Theodora. Luke was most certainly scared, he agreed from behind her. Luke was so scared he almost didn't get himself down from there. Nell, what an imbecile you are. I would be inclined to agree with Luke. The doctor was displeased, and Eleanor looked away, looked at Theodora, and Theodora said, I suppose you had to do it, Nell? I'm all right, Eleanor said, and could no longer look at any of them. She looked, surprised, down at her own bare feet, realizing suddenly that they had carried her, unfeeling, down the iron stairway. She thought, looking at her feet, and then raised her head. I came down to the library to get a book, she said. What the ridiculous, fresh hell is this nonsense? Good God. Hi, Snow. Thank you for announcing your presence. Bulls had a great ending. Didn't stop the entire summer for a second. Dang, you guys were talkative that chapter. Sucker Punch is awful story-wise. The set pieces looked cool, though. Yeah, the visuals are really the only... The visuals and the score I thoroughly enjoyed. I liked each individual Fantasyland story. Blue Spruce Space versus Juniper, slightly more sweet. One Crab, you're ridiculous. Can you see the thing that happened in the intro that you were talking about last week? Not yet. It still hasn't happened, I think. Or do you mean, can I say the thing that happened in the intro that I was talking about last week? Is that what you meant? Oh, say. Keep reading, Tiffany. Yeah, in the intro, the person who wrote it had said something about Eleanor being in a car crash in the car that she basically stole. That hasn't happened yet. Which is also what leads me to believe that she's dead. But I don't know if she's dead. Like, maybe she was a manifestation and that's how they know her, but she did actually die. And so just now in that scene, it was her ghosty ghouly side running about. I don't know. I mean, at least it's leaving things up for speculation. So there's a slight interest here. Like there seemed to be the kernels of a decent enough story in here, depending on how it ends, to where it could have been a good friggin' movie. But book. Why they? Yeah, he's definitely a style over substance director, that's for sure. I like some of his movies too. Sorry. Yeah, when it went off, it startled me a little bit, but at least I was reading, so like I don't know, it didn't affect me as much as probably someone who was listening. It was good timing. That's true. That's very true. I strategically planned it for the setting to establish the spookiness. Well, I haven't gotten to the ending yet. Hopefully it unfroze itself. Is my internet good? We good? I feel like we're good. Yes, Raiders. Hello, Prof. Don't what the fuck me. I am pressing X to doubt. Well, back in the day. I mean, maybe. This profound author is a woman. Miarg, 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 miarg. Yeah, but it still hasn't happened yet. I don't know Heinlein. Or maybe I do and I just didn't know it was the author. You might need to just read the last few pages off stream to know how it ends and then act like nothing ever happened for your own mental health. I don't know how to interpret that. I don't know. I feel like now, yes, her mother is here, like is I don't know. I got nothing. It's not making any sense, but I do. Robert A. Heinlein. This is a shorter chapter, but it's decent enough. Yeah, I'll read this chapter. Do you guys just want me to finish it? It's only 3 chapters. They're not very long. It's like 8 pages. That was, well, 9 pages technically. I'll still split the chapters though. All right, let's do it to it. Part 9, Chapter 2. It was humiliating, disastrous. Nothing was said at breakfast, and Eleanor was served coffee and eggs and rolls just like the others. She was allowed to linger over her coffee with the rest of them, observe the sunlight outside, comment upon the good day ahead. For a few minutes, she might have been persuaded to believe that nothing had happened. Luke passed her the marmalade. Theodora smiled at her over Arthur's head. The doctor bade her good morning. Then, after breakfast, after Mrs. Dudley's entrance at 10, they came without comment. following one another silently to the little parlor, and the doctor took his position before the fireplace. Theodora was wearing Eleanor's red sweater. Luke will bring your car around, the doctor said gently. In spite of what he was saying, his eyes were considerate and friendly. Theodora will go up and pack for you. Eleanor giggled. She can't. She won't have anything to wear. Nell, Theodora began, and stopped and glanced at Mrs. Montague, who shrugged her shoulders and said, I examined the room. Naturally. I can't imagine why none of you thought to do it. I was going to, the doctor said apologetically, but I thought, you always think, John, and that's your trouble. Naturally, I examined the room at once. Theodora's room? Luke asked. I wouldn't like to go in there again. Mrs. Montague sounded surprised. I can't think why not. There's nothing wrong with it. I went in and looked at my clothes, Theodora said to the doctor. They're perfectly fine. The room needs dusting, naturally. But what can you expect if you lock the door and Mrs. Dudley cannot? The doctor's voice rose over his wife's. Cannot tell you how sorry I am, he said, if there is ever anything I can do. Eleanor laughed. But I can't leave, she said, wondering where to find words to explain. You have been here quite long enough, the doctor said. Theodora stared at her. I don't need your clothes, she said patiently. Didn't you just hear Mrs. Montague? I don't need your clothes, and even if I did, I wouldn't wear them now. Nell, you've got to go away from here. But I can't leave, Eleanor said, laughing, still because it was so perfectly impossible to explain. Madam, Luke said somberly, you are no longer welcome as my guest. Perhaps Arthur had better drive her back to the city. Arthur could see that she gets there safely. Gets where? Eleanor shook her head at them, feeling her lovely heavy hair around her face. Gets where? She asked happily. Why, the doctor said, home, of course. And Theodora said, Nell, your own little place, your own apartment where all your things are. And Eleanor laughed. I haven't any apartment, she said to Theodora. I made it up. I sleep on a cot at my sister's in the baby's room. I haven't any home, no place at all, and I can't go back to my sister's because I stole her car. She laughed, hearing her own words so inadequate and so unutterably sad. I haven't any home, she had said again, and regarded them hopefully. No home. Everything in all the world that belongs to me is in a carton in the back of my car. That's all I have. Some books and things I had when I was a little girl, and a watch my mother gave me. So you see, there's no place you can send me. I could, of course, go on and on, she wanted to tell them, seeing always their frightened, staring faces. I could go on, leaving my clothes for Theodora. I could go wandering and homeless, errant, and I would always come back here. It would be simpler to let me stay, more sensible, she wanted to tell them, happier. I want to stay here, she said to them. I've already spoken to the sister. Mrs. Montague said importantly, I must say she asked first about the car, a vulgar person. I told her she need have no fear. You were very wrong, John, to let her steal her sister's car and come here. My dear, Dr. Montague began and stopped, spreading his hands helplessly. At any rate, she is expected. The sister was most annoyed at me because they had planned to go off on their vacation today. Although why she should be annoyed at me, Mrs. Montague scowled at Eleanor. I do think someone ought to see her safely into their hands, she said. The doctor shook his head. It would be a mistake, he said slowly. It would be a mistake to send one of us with her. She must be allowed to forget everything about this house as soon as she can. We cannot prolong the association. Once away from here, she will be herself again. Can you find your way home? He asked Eleanor, and Eleanor laughed. I'll go and get that packing done, Theodora said. Luke, check her car and bring it around. She's only got one suitcase. Walled up alive, Eleanor began to laugh again at their stone faces. Walled up alive, she said. I want to stay here. Part 9, Chapter 3. They made a solid line along the steps of Hill House, guarding the door. Behind their heads, she could see the windows looking down, and to one side the tower waited confidently. She might have cried if she could have thought of any way of telling them why. Instead, she smiled brokenly up at the house, looking at her own window, at the amused, certain face of the house, watching her quietly. The house was waiting now, she thought, and it was waiting for her. No one else could satisfy it. The house wants me to stay, she told the doctor, and he stared at her. He was standing very stiff and with great dignity, as though he expected her to choose him instead of the house, as though, having brought her here, he thought that by unwinding his directions he could send her back again. His back was squarely turned to the house, and looking at him honestly, she said, I'm sorry. I'm terribly sorry, really. You'll go to Hillsdale, he said levelly. Perhaps he was afraid of saying too much. Perhaps he thought that a kind word or a sympathetic one might rebound upon himself and bring her back. The sun was shining on the hills and the house and the garden and the lawn and the trees and the brook. Eleanor took a deep breath and turned, seeing it all. In Hillsdale, turn onto Route 5 going east. At Ashton, you will meet Route 39, and that will take you home. For your own safety, he added with a kind of urgency, for your own safety, my dear. Believe me, if I had foreseen this, I'm really terribly sorry, she said. We can't take chances, any chances. I am only beginning to perceive what a terrible risk I was asking of you all. Now, he sighed and shook his head, you'll remember? He asked. To Hillsdale and then Route 5? Look, Eleanor was quiet for a minute, wanting to tell them all exactly how it was. I wasn't afraid, she said at last. I really wasn't afraid. I'm fine now. I was happy. She looked earnestly at the doctor. Happy, she said. I don't know what to say, she said, afraid again that she was going to cry. I don't want to go away from here. There might be a next time, the doctor said sternly. Can't you understand that we cannot take that chance? Eleanor faltered. Someone is praying for me, she said foolishly, a lady I met a long time ago. The doctor's voice was gentle, but he tapped his foot impatiently. You will forget all of this quite soon, he said. You must forget everything about Hill House. I was so wrong to bring you here, he said. How long have we been here? Eleanor asked suddenly. A little over a week. Why? It's the only time anything's ever happened to me. I liked it. That, said the doctor, is why you are leaving in such a hurry. Eleanor closed her eyes and sighed, feeling and hearing and smelling the house. A flowering bush beyond the kitchen was heavy with scent, and the water in the brook moved sparkling over the stones. Far away, upstairs, perhaps in the nursery, a little eddy of wind gathered itself and swept along the floor, carrying dust. In the library, the iron stairway swayed, and light glittered on the marble eyes of Hugh Crane. Theodora's yellow shirt hung neat and unstained. Mrs. Dudley was setting the lunch table for 5. Hill House watched, arrogant and patient. I won't go away, Eleanor said up to the high windows. You will go away, the doctor said, showing his impatience at last, right now. Eleanor laughed and turned, holding out her hand. Luke, she said, and he came toward her silent. Thank you for bringing me down last night, she said. That was wrong of me. I know it now, and you were very brave. I was indeed, Luke said. It was an act of courage far surpassing any other in my life, and I am glad to see you going now, because I would certainly never do it again. Well, it seems to me, Mrs. Montague said, if you're going, you'd better get on with it. I've no quarrel with saying goodbye, although I personally feel that you've all got an exaggerated view of this place. But I do think we've got better things to do than stand here arguing when we all know you've got to go. You'll be a time as it is getting back to the city, and your sister waiting to go on her vacation. Arthur nodded. Tearful farewells, he said. Don't hold with them myself. Far away in the little parlor, the ash dropped softly in the fireplace. John, Mrs. Montague said, possibly it would be better if Arthur... No, the doctor said strongly. Eleanor has to go back the way she came. And who do I thank for a lovely time? Eleanor asked. The doctor took her by the arm and with Luke beside her, led her to her car and opened the door for her. The carton was still in the back seat. Her suitcase was on the floor, her coat and pocketbook on the seat. Luke had left the motor running. Doctor, Eleanor said, clutching at him. Doctor, I'm sorry, he said. Goodbye. Drive carefully, Luke said politely. You can't just make me go, she said wildly. You brought me here. And I am sending you away, the doctor said. We won't forget you, Eleanor. But right now, the only important thing for you is to forget Hill House and all of us. Goodbye. Goodbye, Mrs. Montague said firmly from the steps, and Arthur said, Goodbye, have a good trip. Then Eleanor, her hand on the door of her car, stopped and turned. Theo, she said inquiringly, and Theodora ran down the steps to her. I thought you weren't going to say goodbye to me, she said. Oh, Nellie, my Nell. Be happy. Please be happy. Don't really forget me. Someday things really will be all right again, and you'll write me letters and I'll answer and we'll visit each other, and we'll have fun talking over the crazy things we did and saw and heard in Hill House. Oh, Nellie, I thought you weren't going to say goodbye to me. Goodbye, Eleanor said to her. Nellie, Theodora said timidly and put a hand to touch Eleanor's cheek. Listen, maybe someday we can meet here again and have our picnic by the brook. We never had our picnic, she told the doctor, and he shook his head, looking at Eleanor. Goodbye, Eleanor said to Mrs. Montague. Goodbye, Arthur. Goodbye, doctor. I hope your book is very successful, Luke. She said goodbye and goodbye. Nell, Theodora said, please be careful. Goodbye, Eleanor said and slid into the car. It felt unfamiliar and awkward. I am too used already to the comforts of Hill House, she thought, and reminded herself to wave a hand from the car window. Goodbye, she called, wondering if there had ever been another word for her to say. Goodbye, goodbye. Clumsily, her hands fumbling, she released the brake and let the car move slowly. They waved back at her dutifully, standing still, watching her. They will watch me down the drive as far as they can see, she thought. It is only civil for them to look at me until I am out of sight. So now I am going. Journeys end in lovers' meeting. But I won't go, she thought, and laughed aloud to herself. Hill House is not as easy as they are. Just by telling me to go away, they can't make me leave. Not if Hill House means me to stay. Go away, Eleanor, she chanted aloud. Go away, Eleanor. We don't want you anymore. Not in our Hill House. Go away, Eleanor. You can't stay here. But I can, she sang. But I can. They don't make the rules around here. They can't turn me out or shut me out or laugh at me or hide from me. I won't go, and Hill House belongs to me. With what she perceived as quick cleverness, she pressed her foot down hard on the accelerator. They can't run fast enough to catch me this time, she thought. But by now, they must be beginning to realize. I wonder who notices first. Luke, almost certainly. I can hear them calling now, she thought, and the little footsteps running through Hill House and the soft sound of the hills pressing closer. I am really doing it, she thought, turning the wheel to send the car directly at the great tree at the curve of the driveway. I am really doing it. I am doing this all by myself now, at last. This is me. I am really, really, really doing it by myself. In the unending, crashing second before the car hurled into the tree, she thought clearly, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why don't they stop me? Part 9, Chapter 4. Mrs. Sanderson was enormously relieved to hear that Dr. Montague and his party had left Hill House. She would have turned them out, she told the family lawyer, if Dr. Montague had shown any sign of wanting to stay. Theodora's friend, mollified and contrite, was delighted to see Theodora back so soon. Luke took himself off to Paris, where his aunt fervently hoped he would stay for a while. Dr. Montague finally retired from active scholarly pursuits after the cool, almost contemptuous reception of his preliminary article analyzing the psychic phenomena of Hill House. Hill House itself, not sane, stood against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, its walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone. I hate everything to do with this book. That's the end, everybody. The end of your freaking book. Not your book. This freaking stream's book. Oh my God. I want to throw things right now. Pointless venture. This, All of this right here. Blue-eyed Scorpio is correct. Fucking sadist bitch. Screw you, person mimicking Shirley Jackson or Shirley Jackson herself. Oh, that's why I know his name. Gotcha. Oh, look, and food magically appears. Thank you. He knew that I was annoyed, so I needed food. They gave me fries, not cheese curds. Oh. Well, at least you got money back. Thank you. Sam. Curd platter. They lied. It's on the receipt, and you have a window to look inside the little box.
There's even
like check the receipt that's attached to the little box with the window.
On the receipt, on the big receipt on the back, it said checked by, and it signed a person.
Oh my god, do you guys hear that? They signed off on it. Freaking hell. What is a? Wow. Phrasing, Shirley. I know this isn't your century and all, but come on. I love chat. Well done. Yes, cloths are overrated. The award I got for outstanding achievement in literature speaks for itself. Yeah, it sure does. For the National Book Award in 19, but did not win. Well, at least it didn't win. The fact that it became a finalist, what the freak ever. People are crazy.
You should do like a overview review of the book, and then put it up here. And put it as a video.
I like how you misspelled the name, Sam. Superstitious illiterates. Nice. Like Jane Austen on Thorazine and Xanax. I love these reactions, guys. I'm dumbfounded at this freaking book. Yes, Buffalo Wildlings. This is more exciting. What's in the box? I don't know. I don't know. Possibly. I think that's probably what happened, and now she's trapped inside the house. That's what I take from that ending. Because they didn't mention Eleanor at all. So, yeah. I'm not going to tell him that, Dom. Yeah, by crashing the car into a tree. She just killed herself rather than leave the house. What the in Minecraft? I am seriously so close to actually cooking this one, okay? I just finished it, MSK. It was trash. Do not recommend. 0 out of 75. No. That's pretty much any awards nowadays. Mudcrab. What the hell? I barely touched the mouse. Oh, this thing's driving me crazy. I'm just going to take it off for now. It's the ghosts in this house. I'm not going to say her name. I'm not actually going to grill them, though. It ends with us. Yeah, almost. That would have been a feat in itself. I am translucent white. I cannot believe that that book just ended that way. What the fresh hell was that? This is going on the shelf and never coming off. Holy crap. I guess next week, technically, I'll probably have it for just like reference points. Yeah, great book. That's an interesting way to put it. Yeah, I really care so much about that. Worth it. Holy crap, you guys. That was some nonsense. How many weeks have I been dealing with this? Like a month? My God. 10 out of 10. Shut up, MSK. Little shit. I cannot believe what I just read. Like, I'm dumbfounded at this point. What the hell? Holy crap. Let's see. 5, 2. When did I start this? On July 11th. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 streams. 7 weeks of this. I think I missed a week in between at one point. Yeah. But, so it would have still been 7, I guess. Would have just ended last week. Dang, I cannot believe the torture that I just put y'all through. I am so sorry. I cannot believe that I did that to you.
Yeah.
It was rude of me. Shut
You're
the fuck
bitch.
up. I hope you couldn't hear him. I'm not telling you what he said. It was rude. Yeah, she just drove herself into a tree. She is a terrible main character. Protagonist, whatever the fuck. She wasn't even a protagonist. She was just a psycho. Jesus. Oh, that is so unsatisfactory. I'll give the show a chance, and that's mainly because you explained it and the differences, and it has me intrigued. Like God, like I was saying earlier, there is potential for an actual story in this nonsense, and it was just not fleshed out. Like, I don't know, go back to basics, Shirley, if you're still in the chat. Like, maybe do an overview and then do an outline and then do a rough draft and then a first draft, maybe 75 drafts before you actually try and publish something like that again. Holy crap. Wherever you live now to publish again. God. Holy crap. That was something. Yeah, I might just do that as well. I'm probably going to read my manga that I need to catch up on. And if you call me a fucking weeb for it, I don't care. I mean, let's take it as a rational story. Eleanor is clearly emotional, fragile person with social problems. Yes. So she has an episode, and these other kids just decided to put her in her car to drive herself. I know. Like, and I don't understand the logic behind it because you don't have any insight into these characters and what they're thinking at any point during this story. So the way it skips around, you just don't know what the hell is going on, which I'm sure is probably one of the clever little points she thought she was making with it is like, you're not supposed to know. No, shut the fuck up. Like, give me an actual story before you decide to be some highbrow bitch about your shit. Like, we don't even really know what actually happened for any of the incidents prior. That was god awful. That was what, maybe 5 incidents of actual like horror, scary things going on in this book, and then everything else was complete drivel. It was just fluffy nonsense, heavy emphasis on nonsense. Sam, god damn it. Hey Andy, sorry, I saw this and I didn't highlight it. How's it going? I hope your evening is better than mine because I just finished this ridiculous book. I wonder if the author had this planned out when she started the story, or if she had a major course correction, because I don't feel like she had a blueprint or was trying to be too clever for her skill. Yeah, it was just nonsense. And like, I made that little joke about proper punctuation. I know it was written in a different time, so things were done differently. With language, it is ever evolving, of course. But good Lord, if I could show you the shit that I had to read through sometimes to even put any sort of inflection on it properly was practically impossible. God, I felt like I was just like blathering on and on and on at some point where like, find a comma somewhere in your typewriter, lady. There were commas in typewriters, right? Sam, you would know, you're ancient. Well, thank you, Andy. I appreciate it. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, we just get left with these cliffhangers for us to just wonder at and not give us any simple explanation whatsoever. It's ridiculous. I'm probably going too much into this where I can talk about it and let it simmer next week. So I should probably stop venting, but God, it's just so fresh on my brain. And I glance over and thank you, Dom, with the 25. I can't say what Ripa says because I don't remember all of it, but doesn't say anything. Moon walks out the door. It's about all my brain can remember currently. I appreciate you. Thank you. Yeah, I have a stream Elements. I probably should have mentioned that at some previous point in this stream. My bad. Pin comment for the next 2 minutes while I blather on like this author did for the last 2 months. Oh, wait. I was reading some of the wiki. There's a theory by some no-name author that Theodora is queer and the story is an important book in queer development. So does anyone else think he was gay? So that's what I'm saying. In what I'm saying. Blah, 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 blah. In the introduction, it gave away too much information of the book, right? And the person that wrote the introduction actually says that, like talks about how there are some theories out there that Theodora, her roommate, may actually be like a female partner or whatever. I don't care. I don't pick up on that because there's nothing to these characters. There is nothing to these characters. I can feel like at certain points where it seems like Eleanor and her are closer than what would be normal nowadays. But back whenever the fresh hell this fucking, I feel like it was a different timeline when this was written and someone threw it across the freaking CERN or whatever when they turned it on. But whatever. Things were different back then. And it's like that idea of looking at pieces of literature or even just history in general from a modern lens. You should not do that. It needs to be looked at from the time that it was written, drawn, thought of, all of that. Because language, as I mentioned earlier, evolves over time and changes. Like gay, that term was mentioned multiple times in this book, but it does not mean gay like it means today. It just meant happy back then. And I'm not saying that that theory is using that, but that's just an example as to you have to look at it from the lens of the time that it was written. I watched too much Metatron recently, so that was like a fresh type of looking at it as a modern lens. Yeah. Frustrating. It's frustrating. Frustrating. This is the Andy Warhol of novels. Everybody praises it, even knowing it's shit. I know Andy Warhol's name. No idea who that is. You're all gonna hate me in the like next year with all the references that I don't get until you have to explain like who it is so I know who it is, and then be like, oh, I get it now. Sorry. Yes, Andy, you are correct. I do find part of the story interesting, but none of this is remotely scary. Yeah. And it's not even like, it wasn't even a psychological thriller. It was just nonsense the entire time. Bah. Your average Patriot nerd, have a good evening, night. Thank you for staying with us for the long haul, pun intended. Yeah, that was not good at all, but thanks for reading. You're welcome. I hope I at least could entertain somehow through my pain and torture. Oh, you're answering it was written as a horror. Got it. Well, so it's the book itself is labeled as a horror. Like this is part of a series from Guillermo del Toro. It's like a classic horror novel, Sam, which is stupid. I don't know when it was given that moniker though, so correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, when I was just putting random Google searches about this book, that would come up as recommended searches. Yep. But that's the whole thing. How is this like making strides in the freaking LGB whatever alphabet soup? Like, what about this book was anything like that? Nothing. There were hints towards it that you could see from the modern lens, but that's just putting shit into it that you want to see. Like you're reading it how you want to read it when you do that. It's a product of its own time, not modern times. So frustrating. What is the level below D? I think this one might be. It would go into the void, but per Devil's rules, the void is for anything that isn't actually part of the subject of the get ranked. So if Biscotti wasn't actually a cookie, which I still don't think it is and should have been in the void, but whatever, then it would have stayed in the void. There isn't a level below D, even though there were some that I thought are hot garbage and would be tier Z as in Zulu and not Z for Canadian friends. Z. It's not even part of the phonetic alphabet. Stop saying Z. The letter is Z. Theo stands out for being an imperfect, fallible queer woman. This is the quote from the article. Seriously, how do you get queer woman out of Theodora? Like she was hanging on to Luke for portions of the book. Like flirtatious conversation with him. It's ridiculous. And then it's just alluded to them being close, but women were closer back then. Like that. And straight. Shocking, I know. Post-World War II is the other end of the pendulum swing, the McCarthy trials and such. Have you seen the movie about Alan Turing? He broke the German Enigma code and may have won the war. I have not seen that. Do you know what it is called? Although I'm not good with like war stuff for personal reasons, but I'll look into it. Well, thank you, Dom. I appreciate that. Warhol was an artist. Ah, one of those. An artist. Just shed some light on something that's revealed early in the first episode. Okay. I'll check. Yeah, don't say anything. I'd rather be held in suspense by the show than by this freaking book. Turing was given the choice between chemical castration in prison for being gay in the 50s in England. And this book was written before that. So like, oh, and it was written by a woman and potentially about a gay woman. And I think in the intro they were talking about there were like rumors that she could have been gay or something, but I thought she was married. I don't know. I don't care. Whatever. That sucks for them. You did the right thing because it's not a D. I'm not getting into it. I know I set my mug down, which is a telltale sign that I want to get into it, but I'm not going to. George Rob, boy, he was so high on the sequel. In your home is a massive no. If he had just gotten a steady boyfriend, no one would have. Imitation Game. Oh, I've heard of that. I had no idea what it was about. That's interesting. I might check that out. Interesting. All right. Cool. Well, thank you guys for hanging out. This was quite a long one, but I needed to get through that book. Oh, damn. If it's okay with my guests, and I'll reach out later, possibly next week it will actually be when I start doing this on Wednesdays instead of Thursdays. First of all, because it's football season just started. And also just because I think the day will work better. I didn't want to do it previously when I first started because of Wrongthink. But that's now on Tuesdays for the foreseeable future. So I think I'm just going to move this same time, 6 p.m. Mountain on Wednesdays. But I'll see you guys later. It's been fun. I appreciate you guys sticking through it with me and hopefully enjoying my fury that I might clip out because good Lord. Terrible book. Worst book. Oh. Y'all have a good night.